Hello, everyone. It's Gareth Mitchell here again to bring you some Somewhere on Earth. And it's Tuesday, the 5th of March, 2024. And I'm in London. We have, at least one voice from the others, from across the pond anyway, from the United States, joining us, as you'll hear. And another very important voice is expert Ghislaine Boddington. Here we are again, Ghislaine. How are things? You okay?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you, Gareth. Yes, and it's good to be back with you. And this looks like a really interesting show today.
We've got a lot to get through. So, well, I think we should.
Yes, let's go
Do you
for
reckon?
it. Yeah.
All right, here it comes. And coming up today, from tackling child hunger to preparing younger people for work, we're talking to a leading light in the US's efforts to bring more government and public services online for everyone, whether young or old. And ever get that annoying ringing or buzzing in your ears? I certainly do sometimes. And if that's you too, then help may be on its way thanks to an app that's just been shown to alleviate the condition. That's all right here on the Somewhere on Earth podcast. All right then. Now, the other day we heard all about digital government in Ukraine. So just go back to our very recent Ukraine special to hear that. And we heard there how Ukraine is really rather digital. Not quite as far forward as you may think is that giant of a country. Yes, the land that landed a human on the moon and is home to Silicon Valley. The United States, it turns out, still has, it's doing pretty well, don't get me wrong, but it still has some way to go when it comes to connecting citizens and services online. So it's just as well that some very bright people are doing something about it. One such person is Amanda Renteria. She's the CEO of Code for America. Welcome to Somewhere on Earth, and Amanda. And, obvious first question, what is Code for America?
Well, first, it's just great to be with you. I appreciate this podcast and all that you share with the world out there. So Code for America is what we do is we leverage technology to help governments deliver benefits more effectively. Or another way to say it is we're doing our best to modernize government for a new generation, which, as you said, might sound like a simple thing as I'm calling in from Silicon Valley. But in fact, it's quite hard to move these systems, these bureaucratic systems that have been in place for a very long time while technology is moving so quickly. And the demand and desire from people today are really that it should be digitized. And so what we do is we help governments try and meet people where they are so they can get the benefits that they're eligible for.
And I'm going to talk about forms here. Now, please don't hate me, Amanda, but I'm going to put it to you that a lot of people think that forms are really boring. You know, we all hate filling in forms, let's face it. And yet, you and your colleagues can attract 2,000 attendees from 25 countries to a virtual event to kind of work on forms, to showcase the very best of governments working to make services accessible. So persuade that person listening thinking, I really do not want to listen to a whole podcast about forms. Tell them why they should care.
Well, listen, when you think about interactions with government, it actually starts with the form. It's like the front door of government. And while you might not think you interact with government every day or all the time, you in fact do, whether it's getting your driver's license or it's food assistance or it's that college loan that you need or it's workforce programs that you're interested in. Every interaction that you're interacting with government starts with the form. And so when we actually did what we called Form Fest, we could see quite quickly how governments around the world, government leaders around the world recognize that this truly is the front door to government. And it really does set the stage for what is the relationship between people and how they interact with these big institutions that affect their lives in all kinds of ways. And so not only was our podcast on a boring topic, but the truth is the subject matter actually was affecting our lives every single day. And when we got into the details, it wasn't boring.
Yeah.
It was interesting
Anything
and
but.
sometimes super frustrating, right?
Yeah, no, sure. Because I'm assuming that in FormFest it's more, but it would include this, but it's more than saying, oh, maybe we should change the font or the background colour. And if I'm sure all those things matter, I don't mean to diminish even that, so it's looking at the aesthetics, I suppose, but also much more fundamentally at that front door into government services, isn't it?
That's right. It's not just about what the form is. It's how it asks the question. Will you feel good about it? Will you get the answer right? Or on the back end, does it make you feel bad? Like in some low-income programs, some of the questions really do assume you're a criminal, as an example. The other part of it is the question simple enough where we're reducing the errors when people apply? Because if you ask the wrong question, or ask a difficult question and somebody answers it incorrectly because it was confusing, that's a whole lot of work for governments on the back end to figure out how to get the right answers in order to get you the services they need. And so it's a lot more complicated than people realize. It's just not a checkbox of yes or no. It really is, how do you communicate well with people in their language, in their culture?
And Amanda, I'm fascinated by this because as someone who's pretty dyslexic, I find forms really, really hard to do. And I'm always frustrated by, opening up another form, even from the same company or university I'm working with, and it's a totally different format again. And I've got to feel like I'm learning from scratch all the time, yeah? But I was wondering, when you had your Form Fest in 25 countries, were there any countries that particularly stood out as good example that that you were looking to, or that came up as real models that were doing well on this?
So what came up was where there was centralization already in the system. So as an example, when agencies were more combined in certain countries, obviously their application process was also better because it meant, as an example, instead of applying 9 different times for one thing, you can apply once, largely because those departments were combined. And so what we're trying to do at Code for America is we try and work with states, we try and work with agencies and say, instead of applying 9 times, how about we figure out what all those questions are and apply once? And that's really been the focus. And so some governments have agencies that are combined. Some governments are ahead. In fact, some have moved past the paper form, particularly when they're looking at tax forms. There's a lot of countries who do it a heck of a lot better than the United States when it comes to filing taxes, where we have both a federal process and a state process, and you have credits that are entirely different. It's much more consolidated that we've seen across the country relative to the United States. And so it kind of depends, and this is what we learned at the Form Fest, is there are a lot of countries who are doing certain things better and that we can learn from, that we can share in, but all across, we all need to do better at integrated forms, simpler forms, and truly a way of meeting people where they are, including, you mentioned dyslexia, including the opportunity to perhaps have an audio intake form, which some folks are already working on.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Course, yeah, because there is an accessibility and a diversity issue there as well, and people who are neurodiverse. There are all kinds of aspects that can make it easier for some people than others to access government services at that all important front door. So
yes, absolutely. So the other thing I was really interested in reading up about your work was that there was quite a lot around a safety net innovation lab. And I was wondering if you could tell us more about that, because we've had quite a few discussions around innovation labs, but the safety net side of it, it seems like this is a very important area. And is that innovation lab for actually trying to create some new models?
Yeah, and what is a safety net as well?
Yes.
So safety net in the United States is really all of your programs around food assistance, healthcare, childcare programs, housing assistance, energy assistance. And so there's all these programs that states and federal government has. And our idea was twofold. One was, how can we make the process simpler? How can we help states integrate benefits across their different programs? And to the extent possible, how can we actually autofill some of these forms? So government has a lot of information. Oftentimes, states know the income levels. Instead of saying, tell us what you might be eligible for, the idea is once you fill out one form, through an application process, you can say, hey, you're eligible for all these other 5 things. And so the opportunity to really bring that together was important. But I'll also say how we did it was also important. You'd imagine that in a state with, or in a country with 50 states, that folks work together a lot. Well, state governments don't work together as much. And so we created a cohort model where we brought states together who were dealing with application intake problems, others who were dealing with how they communicate on renewals to people. And we learned from that cohort modeling, bringing states together, we were actually able to elevate best practices across those states, but also make it easier for any one of those states to try out new things because they were doing it together. And so, so far it's been a really incredible hub because it's not only given us some intelligence about what states are facing at any given time, but it's also helped us deploy best practices when we are able to gather them as a group and say, here is the playbook for this brand new program that's coming into play, or this policy that is changing at the federal level that's going to affect all states across the country.
So the innovation lab side of that then presumably is bringing a load of people together to really to make that work even better. Then you talk about bringing in insights from across different states. It's one advantage that you have in the United States that you have a lot of stuff going on at state level, and then of course the federal picture. So I guess there's a lot of space for innovation.
There is, and it's simple in that sense, right? Which is when you have a 50-state model where everyone's experimenting and they don't talk to each other, we're really missing the opportunity. And so what we thought about in our innovation lab is how can we speed up the lessons across 50 states, take the best of what's happening, share across the organization, and help with the technology that they need. So at Code for America, we can build the software itself if that's what a state needs. We can partner with the state itself, build together, or we can advise their innovation and engineering teams to build what the state needs. Our entire goal as a nonprofit is to make sure that the government does it. We don't want to become the vendor. We want governments to be able to do this work to modernize on their own, which makes us a unique organization in this world of technology where vendors are coming every day to the door to sell something new. We're actually trying to help government have the capacity and capability to do it themselves.
And thinking about some specific areas of where you're helping people, for instance, reducing child hunger, isn't it? Electronic benefit transfers and improving those. How children, especially in poorer communities, can get access to food benefits, isn't it?
That's exactly right. When the pandemic hit and all kids had to stay home, we were in a bit of a crisis across the country where how are we going to get services to kids who are no longer coming into the school? And that's really where several states came together and said, we need to figure out how do we get our data in place, how we actually digitally deliver services to kids at home. And that really started this model and thinking of how do you really digitize the delivery of benefits? What are all the things you need in the infrastructure of a state government to the actual delivery system itself? That has really changed the way people look at what government benefits they can access and how they should access them.
Can this be done in an even smarter way? I'm just thinking about if you have a child who's applying for benefits and, through their parents, that the system can somehow then detect algorithmically that therefore this is a family that is entitled to other benefits that may have other issues. Maybe it'll even pick up that the children need some special kind of educational support. How far can this go?
That's the vision. That's exactly the vision. And some states are farther than others in terms of when you apply for food assistance, it then talks about the child care programs. Or when you're applying for college application or college loans, it says, wait a second, do you know about this food assistant program? And so that is the vision. And there are some states who have done a really great job, Minnesota being one of them, where they have actually combined 9 different benefits. So when you apply, you're actually applying for 9 different benefits. And at the end, it tells you which ones you're eligible for, or it links you up with those benefits directly. And that's the vision, though. The vision is to be able to say you apply, and ideally it tracks. Now you're in college, now you're in the workforce, now you just had a child, now you want to buy a home. I mean, that's when government is really working with the community. And so our vision is exactly that. That over the course of your life, your interaction with government really follows you and empowers you along the way on what's available to you, and also educating you, because many people don't actually know some of these programs even exist. And that was really one of the things that we really pushed on in our programs, is not only do you need to help people through an application process, but some of it is an education process to even know it exists. And when you have them applying, that's an opportunity to have that kind of relationship with people, to share what government does and what people are eligible for throughout the course of their life.
So, Glenn, we started this conversation talking about good old forms and like how many questions should they have and how should the questions be phrased. Very important stuff. And now we've widened it right out to the bigger picture, to improving standards of living and the fight, and really part of the fight against poverty.
No, I think it's amazing. The joining of the dots that's happening, that you're managing to enable, both at the state level and then at the federal level. And I guess that bigger picture is really important, because you just start to have a big umbrella overview of what's happening across the whole of the United States by this joining of the dots from small local to the larger levels. So yeah, I think I'm really impressed by it. And I think the whole area of having a repository in a way where you like you said, Amanda, you can fill in one form and you get told about many others, and that information's already being used, because that is one of the frustrations, isn't it? Filling in the same stuff again and again and again and again. Yes, so, yes, yes. But to try and get this bigger picture, which ultimately, I guess, in the long run, really does start to bridge the poverty divide. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I mean, one other way to think about this is there are so many policies that also change, right? How are we making sure that we're informing an entire population of the latest policies that are out there? And if you don't have a dynamic, modern system, people really do get lost, whether it's climate change, whether it's getting an alternative energy vehicle. And so it's not just for figuring out how do we make sure we lift people up, but how do we keep a modern society really moving forward together? And government programs can do that if they can understand the implementation aspect of the policies they're passing in Congress.
All right. Well, there we'll leave it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I got more out of that than I was expecting. I thought we were going to be talking about what font size you should have on a form. But seriously, really, I knew it'd be better than that, obviously, Amanda. What a brilliant booking. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Amanda Renteria of Code for America. She's the CEO. And folks, there's a lot more that we're going to find out about Amanda and her fascinating background in politics, in industry. She has a whole lot of stuff going on, and we're going to hear about it in the subscription version of this podcast. So you should know by now how to get there, but you have the subscription option through most podcatchers. And do join us for some extra chat from Amanda, because she's fascinating, and you'll hear much more about her. But now, let's talk about tinnitus, the condition that gives you ringing or buzzing in the ears. There's a 1 in 4 chance that you have it, and it can be very persistent and indeed very unpleasant. It can even lead to anxiety or depression in the most serious cases. But now, a new cognitive behavioural therapy chatbot app can be rather helpful. That's according to new research. The findings come from an international research team, and the research has shown that the app can effectively reduce the debilitating impact of tinnitus in just a few weeks. Well, producer Anja Litorovic is right here on this side of the glass to tell us a bit more. So first, tinnitus, how widespread is it?
The number of people who experience tinnitus globally is absolutely huge. 1.5 million people in Australia, 4 million in the UK, 20 million in the USA have severe tinnitus. Now, figures aren't that readily available for the global south, so the issue is really significant. The condition affects hearing, mood, concentration, sleep, and in severe cases causes anxiety and even depression. But, what does it sound like? So please, if you are sensitive to ringing sounds or have tinnitus, please stop the podcast now. Fast forward about 20 seconds as we will now play you the different sounds people can hear, often constantly. Final warning, we are playing the sounds in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sorry, that noise is us putting our headphones back on because it was horrible.
Yes, really horrible.
Well,
I'm glad you did the warning.
Back with us now. So, what is the cure? Well, there isn't one because we still don't know the cause of tinnitus. It's still unknown.
Well, listening to this podcast, I think.
Yeah, after that little 15-second clip. It could be caused by damage to the inner ear, by loud noises. So a lot of musicians do have it. This kills off cells in the cochlea, resulting in nerve damage, and a lack of a real auditory signal to the brain creates this kind of internal sound. It can be caused by some cancer drugs and even possibly stress and tension from the jaw and neck.
So, Anya, what do doctors do then when a patient presents suffering with tinnitus?
Well, some patients are told there's nothing that can be done. Others offer cognitive behaviour therapy, which is effective and works in many cases. But this needs to be delivered by a trained psychologist. Therefore, waiting times are long, and the treatment can be very costly. So, one audiologist, Dr. Fabrice Bardy, thought that he could come up with something better.
More than the hearing, there's also this very personal relationship with the tinnitus. And it's really where I felt that I did not have the tool to sort of like be able to help my patients. Fast forwarding, so I spent 5 years in the clinic and then 10 years doing some neuroscience research. And in 2019, I thought that it could be a possibility to sort of like develop a piece of technology, a digital program that we could deliver at scale and it could help audiologists to help their patient to sort of like get access to methods which are clinically validated. And some of them are like cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, relaxation technique, and a program to sleep better, and also sound therapy. So my idea at this time was like, okay, there's definitely a problem. A lot of people are not currently receiving the care needed to regain control and to be able to tune out the tinnitus. Is it the possibility to develop something that could be accessible via a piece of technology which is nearly in everybody's pocket, which is just a mobile phone?
So that's audiologist Fabrice Bardy. Anya, this then brings us to the MindEar app, isn't it? This is the one that's now being tested and is the subject of the research I mentioned in the introduction.
Well, yes, it's Dr. Bardy, who is based at the University of Auckland, and he's actually the lead author of the study, which is published in the journal Frontiers in Audiology and Otology. The clinical study of 30 people with tinnitus, in that almost 2/3 of participants reported a clinically significant improvement when using the chatbot-based app. And now there's a much larger clinical study that's about to get underway at University College Hospital in London.
All right. So I've already said that I get a little bit of tinnitus now and then. Ghislaine, how about you?
Yes, I do. I do suffer slightly from tinnitus or tinnitus. But I do know several people who have it far more often, and a couple of people I know who've got it all the time, apparently. So, but I downloaded the MindEar app to have a play with it, and I have to say it's very well made. And even before you have to pay a subscription, you can learn a lot in that app about the methods and what they will offer in the subscription version. But there's really a lot of videos. There's little chats. You just touch and ask more questions to learn more about the condition and the methods that can be used to relieve it, depending which works for you. And they make it like a journey. You have to go like along a kind of a process, 1, 2, 3, 4. And part of it's based on CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, which is put forward as a very effective way for managing tinnitus, because they believe that it's linked to negative thoughts and beliefs that we kind of loop in our head, which causes anxiety and anger. And that links to cognitive behavioural therapy because it helps us to challenge and reframe thoughts to reduce the distress in our lives and therefore hopefully reduce the tinnitus. Yeah. Now that's one theory. As mentioned in the input by Dr. Brady, I think it is, Bardy, yeah. The other sections also for breathing exercises, helps with better sleep. There's some wonderful sound therapy stuff in there, which I really liked. Mindfulness, there's some great meditation things with full body scans. Well, I'm happy to do all those anyway. And if that's going to possibly help with this by relaxing in some way, and you can choose layers of tracks. You can add in a bird song or rain, for example, into one of the soundscapes. But I do think it's interesting. There's all these different layers. But I think one thing I read in the various research reports, etc., which seems to be pointing somewhere in a direction, is the neck, the use of the neck. And you see so much now we are all misusing our necks because we're constantly looking slightly down at our mobile phones, yeah. And I know that is being talked about, like some people, this kind of humpback on the neck that's coming up in younger people or even in us as we get older from too much, not having the phone at eye level.
And that links into tinnitus.
Neck and head tension is one of the potential. It was more about our anxieties, our distresses, looping things in our brains which may be set off, these intensities in ourselves, and that being linked to also to neck and nerve strain as well.
Yeah, a bit of a confession here. I sometimes get it if I've had a bit too much to drink.
Oh, right. But there is a lot of information on that app. You can download it and read a lot and watch videos before even having to subscribe to help you learn whether you really would like to try it out.
It's very good to have a service that gives you a lot for free before it makes you subscribe. By the way, you can subscribe to the extra on this podcast. By the way, your podcatcher should get you there, and it's an absolute bargain. Right, back to the story. It wasn't bad, wasn't it? I'm not on a commission to say that, by the way. I slipped it in there. Anya, then. So why does all this work?
Well, before birth, our brains start to filter out certain noises, so things like blood rushing past our ears. As we age, we further filter out noises, so traffic, air conditioners, even the noise of sleeping next to someone. Your husband, your wife, your other half. Some alarms, though, like smoke detectors, bypass this filter system and trigger a sense of alertness, especially for sounds linked to negative experiences. And tinnitus, that is when the brain hears a sound in the head with no external source. This causes distress. Brain fixates on this sound, training us to pay more attention to that sound in our head, triggering this alert response. The MindEar app helps people focus, reduce stress responses, as Ghislaine was saying, including reducing stress hormones, ultimately decreasing the brain's focus on tinnitus.
Right, now we know. Well, thank you for bringing us that, Anya. And that'll do for today. Dear listener, please do let us know if you have tinnitus or if you do have it, how you are coping with it or if you're coping with it. And especially if you've used that MindEar app, you can be a reviewer for us if you like and just see if you agree or disagree with what you've heard there. But I think we could really get a good old talking point going around that whole area of tinnitus, given that it's so widespread. So if you do get tinnitus and what causes it in your case as well. So do let us know. Our email address is hello@somewhereonearth.co. On various social media, we're quite searchable. Usually, if you just search for something like Somewhere on Earth, the Global Tech Podcast, that should get you there. And of course, we're on WhatsApp. It's code 44 for the UK, 7486 329 484. Right, fasten your seatbelts. Let's do the credits. Audio this week has been done by the excellent Keziah Wenham Kenyon and Dylan Burton. And we're here at Lanson's Team Farner. The production manager is Liz Toohey. Our editor and producer sitting here right here in the studio is Anya Literovich. You've heard expertise from Ghislaine Boddington and generally a load of waffle from me, Gareth Mitchell. Thanks for being there, folks, and stand by for the subscription version. Otherwise, see you next week. Bye-bye.